Hello and welcome to Books and the World, a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center. I'm your host today, Elisa Metcalf, and I'm here with the author, Susan Wilson. Susan has 11 novels, and one of which was on the New York Times bestseller list entitled One Good Dog. But we're here today to talk about her new novel, The Dog I Love, which is also generating a lot of buzz lately. Susan, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
You have a very impressive resume.
Well, I appreciate your saying that. I worked hard on it. But it's very gratifying to have it.
Oh, good.
So
yes. I want to talk to you about a couple of, especially this book, but some other books as well. But a lot of your books involve dogs.
They do.
And clearly, dogs are a big inspirational force in your writing. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I certainly can. I should preface by saying that I had written 5 novels and had come to that point where all authors come to when you think, I'm going to throw in the towel, this is not working. The novel that I had that my agent was shopping around was dead in the water. And I was ready to say, you know what, I've had a good run, time to stop. And I was on the phone, walking down the street in Edgartown, mobile phone, and I was working at the museum at the time, and I said this to her. I said, Andrea, I think I'm done. And she said, no, you can't be, you can't. And then there was a pause, a beat. And she said, you know, dog books are really popular now. Now this is about the time of The Art of Racing in the Rain, which Garth Stein wrote and has done well with. And it was one of those Road to Damascus things, and I went, I like dogs. I love dogs. I have a dog. I have always had dogs. I can do that. And I put the second part of that is that I got into wanting to write because I loved dog stories. And I loved Albert Payson Terhune's dog stories in particular, and Jack London. And as a kid, I did nothing but read animal stories. So when she ever suggested this to me, I went, yeah, okay. And One Good Dog came out of that within about 9 months, and I've been doing it ever since.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So have you had dogs your whole life?
Pretty much, yes. Yes, from the time I was an infant, my parents had dogs.
Multiple dogs?
Multiple dogs. We had, at one time we had 2 dogs, 2 cats, 2 fish, 2 daughters, and
wow.
You know, my parents were very tolerant of our animals, guinea pigs, all of that sort of thing. And as an adult, we have pretty much had a dog most of the time. We did have some periods in between when we were not able to have dogs because you live in apartments and things like that. But we had a wonderful collie for our kids when they were growing up, and which was the fulfillment of a dream of mine, being the Albert Payson Terhune fan that I am. And of course, he wrote about collies. And then subsequent to that, we had a dog that people have said looks a lot like this one.
Oh, nice.
A terrier hound cross named Bonnie, who ruled our lives for about 14 years.
Don't they all?
They all do. And we doted on her. She was a bit of our empty nest dog, and she was not without flaws, but she was a good dog, and she really saw me through many of these books. So.
Oh, great! Yeah, I was going to say with that kind of a history, that it took 5 books to, and you know it comes with a great audience because animal lovers are very passionate,
yes,
and you know you've done such a nice job
Thank you.
The way you intertwine the dogs into an already very compelling plot.
Thank you.
So let's talk about The Dog I Love. It's 2 main characters, Rosie and Megan, and if you want to just tell us a little bit about their stories.
They are, it's an alternating point of view, Rosie and then Megan Custer. Rosie is, they're both women whose lives have been derailed through circumstances that they're partly culpable for, because Megan Custer is a wounded warrior. She was a captain in the Army, and she was a victim of IED, an explosive device, and her life has been derailed by this, and she's gone from being a leader to being helpless and falling back on living with her parents, which has made her a very bitter and person, but Rosie, who is essentially the protagonist, is a young woman who graduated from a Seven Sisters college and who was working in a coffee shop and meets the man of her dreams, who is, basically a jerk. He is controlling, he's very rich, he's very handsome, he's everything she thinks she wants. He treats her like Henry Higgins treated Eliza. He dresses her, he gets her good haircuts and all that, and she falls into his sway.
Well, he is abusive.
He's
and
abusive.
it's not
Absolutely.
that overt, like he doesn't hit her, but
No, it's a
you know
different kind of
that
abuse.
subtle form of abuse that is very
Very
certainly abuse.
He also separates her from her family
Right.
in many ways,
As
and
is
that's
one of
the
the
alienation
tactics,
has
yep.
become is oppressive to her. Anyway, the crux of the matter is she's now in prison, because of the circumstances. I can do spoiler things here. She kills him, but accidentally, involuntary, and because she has no resources and no money, she's got a public defender and a very angry, almost mother-in-law, and so she ends up
Right.
in prison. in
Who
women's
happens to
prisons.
be well connected and
well
is able
connected,
to
yes.
kind of force her hand with some of the powers that be, and lands this woman who really did not deserve to be imprisoned.
She really didn't. She really didn't. But she's in it, and her saving grace is becoming attached to a training program for dogs, and these do exist. And one they train. Actually, oddly enough, they train dogs to either be service dogs, assistance dogs, or bomb sniffing dogs, which I thought was kind of an interesting dichotomy. But she does the service dog part, and of course, that's how she meets Megan. That's the first half of the story. The second half is suddenly a mysterious benefactor gets Rosie released and sent to Dogtown, which is a part of Gloucester, which exists. It's a conservation area. It's not a not a community anymore. And there she is set to be a project manager rehabbing an old house on the edge of Dogtown.
Yes, well, I want to talk about Dogtown, but just going back to, Rosie and her history there with prison and the whole dog training programs that they have there. I mean, there's a popular show on TV too, the Pit Bulls and Parolees.
Oh,
and-
absolutely. I was devoted to that for years.
Yes, I have a friend who just loves
Yeah,
that.
oh my gosh,
loves that show. But these are very real programs, and how did you go about learning about it and then researching it specifically for the book?
The short answer is I had heard about them, but I had no particular interest in following that. And my agent was wonderful. I'd start this book, and she'd say, there's this program in prisons and dogs. And I know, yeah. And then I did another, no, really, you ought to look at this. And finally, I thought, okay, let's do that. And part of the reason was I'm thinking, well, it's a foregone conclusion how this is going to end. You got the bad person, you got the good dog, and there's going to be redemption. And so, it didn't seem like there was enough of a story to go on till I came up with how I did it. So that's how I was introduced to it. My research was watching programs and articles and things like that. And this is one of those small world things. My next door neighbor, who was a summer person, told me that at his church in Middletown, New York, he has a friend who brings a dog to church every weekend to socialize it because it is part of a prison program. And I thought, oh, how wonderful. And so he gave me her name, and I talked to her. And she was very excited about talking to me, and she gave me quite a number of insights, including the fact that these dogs leave the prison on a weekly basis in order to learn how to ride in cars and to be with other people, and part of that training. And
So it's a well-rounded
it's a
training. I mean, the
well-rou-
prisoners do some of the
Yeah.
basic training there,
Exactly.
but then they have to certainly take them outside and.
Which I had never, didn't cross my
Well,
mind.
yeah,
till I met
who
this.
would think of
Who
that,
think
right.
this? So she's giving me all these insights, and then she says, I think that the founder of this program would like to talk with you. And she came back to me, via email and saying, no, she actually says you can't ever use this. Proprietary information, and I said, well, I'm not going to use the name.
Right.
Nope, she doesn't want you to use this at all. And I thought, well, she has no control over that. So I will not mention it. I don't even remember what it is. And I thought, well, that's too bad. So I felt as though I had carte blanche to do it my way.
Right.
So if I made errors, I made errors, but
Well, that's where, fiction,
fiction is what it
creative
is.
license.
Exactly, but you can't tell me I can't
All of
use the
that.
subject.
And I also like that Megan, the wounded warrior, who we do so often think of as men, that come home and she is paraplegic.
Paraplegic.
So very, and her struggles too, coming back from the war, she has a lot of mental stuff going on. But she is fortunately, has some supportive people around her
She
to help her
does.
transition.
She
and-
does. Her parents are very kind to her, and she really feels helpless in there, and she becomes bitter and not very pleasant. And when this subject comes up of doing this, she's no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And then it occurs to her that
Like to get involved with the
it
program
just
and
needs-
get a dog.
right, to try to do this, and the opportunity opens up in my magical fictional way, and then she and Rosie become fast friends,
Right.
which
And
neither
I
of them
think-
have. So,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
a really nice connection that they are both so different
They are,
and so multi-dimensional too in
well, thank
a
you.
lot of ways.
I try to create as much
yeah.
real,
They
more-
are
more
complex
than-
characters.
They're complex. They are so complex that I was in the weeds for a little while there, and I had to pull back. But
Right, but they have this, this shark is the dog,
Shark is the dog.
and they have this one kind of connecting piece, and through that they discover all these other things they have in
they
common. And I like that, Megan kind of, in her healing process, finds that, through helping Rosie, and she's able to heal too. That
She does.
helps
She
her not
does.
feel so helpless.
It does, and I think her character development, it had to be subtle. You don't go from black and white. You had to do that, and I think that the one unsung character in this whole thing is Marley, who becomes Megan's love interest, which wasn't something that I was seeking to do, but he just kind of evolved into somebody who could see her for who she is because he'd had similar experiences, and he also has an assistant dog, and she really learns, and she learns how to have to trust him too, and that was something that just kind of, as these things often do, just like, oh, where did that come from?
Yeah, and it was a very
She wasn't
interesting.
even supposed to be that much of a character.
I really enjoyed that subplot because you got that insight into Megan and her, her physical limitations and how that affects having a love relationship with, with another person, and her struggles and their discussions about that, where I thought was, an interesting.
It's an interesting
piece.
road to go down. It
Yeah.
really was.
For sure. So the book takes place, as you mentioned, in this dog town,
Dogtown.
which
Well,
is a real place.
It's a real place. It is, and I have to give a shout out to a fellow author, Tom Dresser, who does histories. He's done a multiple number of history books for the History Press, I believe it is, and but years ago, he's actually a native of Cape Ann. And I have no idea how the subject came up, as things do, and he mentioned that he'd done a pamphlet on the Dogtown area. And I thought, that sounds interesting. And Dogtown was called the Commons. It was where the people who went to Cape Ann, to Gloucester, originally settled, because it was higher up, it was away from the water,
Oh,
so
okay.
that they were safer from pirates and from Native
What
Americans.
era is this?
This is in the early 1700s, before the Revolution, probably late 1600s. And eventually the Commons was deserted because they realized they could actually make more money, and the wars were over, and the place was left to, essentially to women, to widows, Revolutionary War widows, War of 1812 widows. And of course, when women are left alone and they have to struggle to make a living, eventually they're known as harlots, or they're known as, witches, or they're known as whatever.
Right. Anybody unmarried is suspect.
Unmarried, suspect, older.
Right.
But they were known for the dogs that they kept. So they had these undescribed dogs, but that's what they were known for. And of course, the last known, they do know what their names were, and how many little cellar holes there are, and those are all numbered now, and they're
wow.
related to the residents. But the last one died out probably in the late 1800s, maybe I don't think they made it into the 20th century, but it's now a conservation area, and at one point, the man, Babson, and I'm going to forget his first name, who founded Babson College, who had a lot of money, it was during the Depression, there were a lot of people out of work, including stonemasons, and he would hire them to write mottos on boulders. So you walk through these woods now, and there are these boulders, and they're hope, study, education,
Oh, interesting.
be good to mother, all this kind of thing. So it's a very interesting place.
That's there now. And
That's
you can
there
see
now,
that
and you can walk there, and you know it's conservation land, and it is not without a feeling of otherworldliness. It's really kind of weird, but
Now,
enjoyable.
does this area promote the Dogtown history too? If you
bit,
go there,
a little
or is
bit.
it kind
There's
of still forgotten?
They definitely are using it. There's a Dogtown bookstore, which is a used bookstore in Gloucester, and there's other references to it. So it's a bit like any place that has sort of
Right.
a landmark.
And
It,
it's-
it just seemed perfect for somebody who's such an outcast or an outlier to end up there.
Yes, I mean it was an ideal location, and I also liked how you managed to weave in some of the history. You know that while Rosie is renovating this house, she finds this
finds a journal.
You know, a journal, and
Which the dog finds.
The dog-
But
right, the
we
dog.
should put in here right now that Rosie is, of course, befriended by a
dog.
mysterious dog. And, you know, there's a little magical thinking in there that he
Mm-hmm.
might have been the same dog that befriended Susanna,
Sure.
who was the journal's writer.
Now this dog too, you refer to as a lurcher.
Lurcher.
Now I mean I've worked with dogs and had a dog worked for veterinarians and everything. I've never heard
Yeah,
the term
it's
lurcher.
essentially a British thing. And it's not a breed by any means. You're not going to see them at the kennel club. But they are very common dogs associated with poachers.
This dog.
That
right
dog.
here.
They are usually some kind of terrier or shepherd mixed in with a whippet, greyhound, wolfhound kind of a dog. So they're rangy, they're thin. If you
Like
Google-
wiry coated.
wiry coated, and that's why after I began to look at this, I thought, well, that's what my dog is. You know,
Yeah,
she's a little bit
kind of like
of a
Russian wolfhoundy.
wolfhound, you know, with that Scottish deerhound kind of a look to them. So they were hunting dogs.
Bigger than the
bigger.
smaller terriers.
They
that,
can be actually, you know, she was about yay high, and I think she was a lurcher. But, you know, lurcher is just a categorization of
Right,
a dog that is these blends and are used for different reasons.
It's interesting. I love that now.
But
I'm
I
like,
had to come up. Notice the guy who says that to her is English.
Yeah, and it's funny because my father, who was also British,
Yeah.
had a dog that now I know was a
Was a
lurcher
lurcher.
because he was certainly a big
right,
kind of
yeah.
with the mustache,
Yep.
wiry.
The furnishings, yes.
And he was a great
Yeah.
dog and a really good companion to my
yeah,
father
they
for
They are such good dogs.
so. Now, what was the inspiration for this plot line?
That's a really good question. When I think back to when I first conceived of the book, which is always, you know, a 2 or 3 paragraph synopsis, which then I share with my agent, who then says it's
Not in the middle of the night,
not
as some of us get.
Yeah, I'm always fishing around. You know, who knows when I'm walking the dog.
Right.
I wanted to write something of a Gothic novel, which I think this is. I mean, it's a modern Gothic because you've got your basic old house, you've got a mysterious benefactor, you've got the Hound of the Baskervilles, if you will, and female friendship and prison and all of those sorts of elements. But I didn't know where to take it, and so I don't know, you know, I like the idea of somebody getting a second chance. I've used that theme several times. The idea of not just redemption, but another opportunity to make good, to turn things around, and it just began to gel. And I work with, you know, my agents, and we talk about things like that. There was actually, to be honest, there was a lot more book there, which is when I began to really feel like I was in the weeds, because I did want to go too far with the Susanna story, and I actually gave her a point of view, and I wrote pages and pages, and fortunately my editor threw me a lifeline and said, no. We really don't need all that. You're doing
Right.
okay without it. And I'm okay.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like too, I even more story, you know,
Yeah.
how they got to this point would have been
Yeah,
great. So when it is picked up as either a movie or a Netflix series or
Yes,
something.
yes,
then
we can hope for that.
No, I mean, it flows very cinematically, I thought.
Thank you.
So,
Well, I think you do. I think writing is scenes. It is,
Yeah.
the visual idea of it. I mean, literary novels perhaps not so much, but I think what I
Right.
try to do is I want to, first of all, entertain. And that's the job, is really, if people are not entertained by these, then I'm not going to teach you anything. I just feel as though if you come away feeling you've had a good story, maybe you cried. That's always good. Or laughed, even better.
right.
Then I've kind of done my job.
Well, and I even learned things about Dogtown and lurchers and whatnot. Now, what's your background in writing? Have you always enjoyed writing?
I have. I'm one of those people, and we are Legion, who always say I always wanted to be a writer, but I also, from the time I was a kid, did. And I did it,
Like journaling or
not
just,
even journaling. Now they call them fanzines, but back in the day,
Oh, okay.
I had a little manual typewriter. And I was probably I was old enough to walk downtown by myself, so I was probably 12. And that was on my school desk.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Middlefield, Connecticut, and downtown was Middletown, so it was a 3-mile walk. And I did it all the time. And I went to Peter's Typewriters, and I bought this manual, Royal Manual, and I pounded out TV shows that I loved and inserted myself in them as a character.
That's wonderful.
So it was all this, I already had these established characters, and then I would be part of the story, and it was
Right, build on that.
build
That's-
on that, and now they do, and then now they're called fanzines. And
Do you still have them?
Oh gosh, no, I don't even have. No, I have no idea.
Wouldn't you love to see those?
I would
now?
not. No, I'm hoping I've improved since then, and But from there,
But that's very creative.
It was it was fun, and I did a lot of it. And then I tried my hand at writing my own stories, and that kind of came and went because I was in high school and in college and didn't have enough time to do that. But the other thing I did was whatever job I've had, and I've had many, somewhere along the line there's been writing involved. And whether it was when I worked for the Connecticut Bank and Trust, I worked on their newsletter. It wasn't part of my job, it was a volunteer thing. So I interviewed people and I wrote articles and feature articles and things like that. And then when we moved to the Vineyard and I finally got an opportunity to focus on writing, the other thing I did for myself was I did work for the local paper, which was doing book reviews or a couple of features, things like. So anything I've done, I have
You've
written.
really been involved.
Had to. I actually wrote, edited, and distributed the PTO newsletter, The Carousel, single-handed because I said, I will do that if I do not have to bake. Worked for them, worked for me. I did that for about 5 years.
Terrific.
So
So when did you finish your first manuscript?
published manuscript or practice manuscript?
Well, practice that
Practice.
became published.
Early 90s. Early 90s. I mean, I have a
And
stack
did-
of them behind, that will never see the light of
Right.
day because they're practice and they're really important.
Right.
I always say that to people, like, yeah, you're going to do a lot of stuff and you're going to put it in your drawer and it's going to be gone, but it's going to have given you the exercise and it's going to have given you the experience to know what works, what doesn't work.
Sure.
So,
And for many of our viewers, who are aspire or hope to be published one day or are sitting there with manuscripts, can you tell us what that process was like? Why did you know, or did you know that this one manuscript was the one that was going to get published?
Connections are a good thing. And like I say, I had written probably 3 or 4 manuscripts. When I say manuscripts, I wrote for myself, first of all. I wrote to entertain myself. I wrote because I didn't do counted cross-stitch.
And they were full length.
Full length, yeah, essentially. In fact, I've got one that was in 2 volumes, but I can't find it. And I went to the Cape Cod Writers Conference. And I was fortunate enough to meet someone who agreed to be my agent, and I am embarrassed to say I don't remember her name. I think it was Crawford. And she had the manuscript that I had been working on for so long and took it and had it for about a year and then called me and said, I can't move this. She was in New Hampshire. She didn't have any connections in New York. Anyway, at the same time, I was in this little writers group of mothers. We were moms together, And one member of that group was a bona fide writer. She'd written for Happy Days, for
Wow.
all those, Laverne and Shirley. Her husband was a comedian, ex-husband is a comedian, and her name's Holly Nadler. She's still around with us. And she was very kind, and she said, she read something of mine. She says, I think my ex-agent would like to look at your stuff. And if you know Holly, that's exactly how she would say it, my ex-agent. And I said, really? So I contacted my agent, the woman who is now my agent, and I said, Holly Nadler said I should contact you. And she said, okay, send me some pages. And then she called me, because this is back in the days when we actually made phone calls and wrote letters.
Right.
And she said, send me the rest. And she took me on, and we have been together, she and her co-agent, for about 25 years.
Oh, wonderful.
So I guess the answer is that I had something good, well enough, workable
Right.
enough, because believe me, she sent me a 5-page letter that said, we should do this and do this and do this and do this. And I thought this was perfect. What's the matter? But I did that, and that.
Right.
And she was able to shop it. But that's it. You have to, an agent is key, in my view.
Right.
An agent is absolutely key.
And the
They
right
are your
agents.
gatekeeper, they are your guidance, they are your editor initially.
And one of your books was made into a screenplay.
It was.
Which one?
It was a beauty, the first one.
Oh,
The
terrific.
first book was, it's one of
Well,
those
your
like-
agent was lucky to find you too, wasn't she?
She was, and that was pretty much a surprise. And we did do, we had nothing to do with it. They optioned it, and the next thing I know, it seems like 3 years later, they were doing it, and it was a CBS Sunday night movie.
Wonderful. Well,
It still
congratulations
shows up every now and again.
on all your success.
Well, thank you so
I
much.
really enjoyed this book. Is there any, can you tell our audience like how they can find all this work? Do you have a website?
I do at SusanWilsonWrites.com, and they're all on Amazon. They're all in local bookstores.
And one of them, you said, what were you telling me about this?
Oh, yes. A Man of His Own.
A Man of His
Own is going to be the Independence, Iowa One Book, One Independence choice for the month of February.
Terrific.
Which I think is so exciting because it's a few years old and they've discovered it, and I'm really excited.
Good, yes, that they keep on living.
They keep on living.
Well, thank you, Susan, for coming.
Thank
It
you,
was
Lisa.
delightful talking to you.
Fun talking to you.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of Books in the World.